This video is on how to solve system of equations word problems. Problem 1. The length of a rectangle is 6 more than 4 times the width. The perimeter of the rectangle is 232 miles. Find the length and the width. Now, many times in Algebra 1, you might have done a problem like this, where you would write W over here, and you would say the length is 4W plus 6. But what's actually happening and what we're really doing is we're setting up a system of equations where we have the width times 4 plus 6 equals the length. And then we also have this perimeter, so 2L plus 2W equals 232. And we're setting up a situation where we make a substitution into a system of equations. Now, many of you, when you're in Algebra 1, would have just added all 4 sides together, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I want to make sure that we understand what's actually happening algebraically. We're making a substitution into a system of equations and solving. By the way, the 2L plus 2W, it's important to remember that perimeter has 2 lengths and 2 widths in it. So if we distributed and added everything together, we would get 10W plus 12 equals 232. I subtract the 12, divide by 10, I get the width is 22. If I make a substitution of W back in to the original, I would probably substitute it in here. I would find out that the length is 94. If you have 2 lengths and 2 widths of these sizes, you would get 232 miles. So again, these are in miles. Second problem. Mr. Stipp takes his daughter and her friends to McDonald's. He buys 5 Big Macs and 8 fries for $22.84. He then takes his son and buys 9 Big Macs and 4 fries for $25.20. How much did each Big Mac and fry cost? One thing I probably should have pointed out in the first problem is you might want to define your variables and make sure you actually understand what you're solving. So in this case, I will make B equal to cost of a Big Mac and F equal to cost of a fry. So if I set this up, this one's actually pretty easy to set up. It's 5B plus 8F equals 2284. 9B plus 4F equals 2520. I'm not going to actually solve very many of these. I'm just assuming that we've watched the 2x2 and the 3x3 videos, and that we've also learned how to solve things using augmented matrices in the calculator. So I'm just going to give you the answers. So Big Macs cost $2.12 and fries cost $1.53. Obviously, those costs are not true anymore, but back in the day, they might have cost that. Number 3, Nike Town sold 240 pairs of shoes on Saturday. Cross trainers were $66.95 and running shoes were $84.95. Total shoe sales for the day were 17,652. How many of each type? So in this problem, we are trying to find the number of shoes. So I can make C equal to number of cross training shoes sold, and R is number of running shoes sold. So in this case, I have 66.95C plus 84.95 R equals a large amount of money, 17,652. And then I can also say C plus R equals 240. And the reason for that is because if these are the number of shoes, then if I add together the number of cross trainers and the number of runners, I'm going to get a total of 240. If I multiply the number of shoes that were sold by their cost, that can give me the total amount. So um, if I solve this system, which I could do by hand by multiplying the bottom one by negative 6695, um, or I can use an augmented matrix if it's a calculator problem, I can get C is 152 cross training shoes sold, and R is 88 running shoes sold. If we look at number 4, it's a pretty long problem. You can read it on your own. One thing that's important to note is we probably should notice that this is going to be a 3 by 3 system. You can tell because we end up having 3 pieces of information. There's the amount of money that's invested, the amount in interest, and we can also see that there are 3 different types of accounts. It's pretty clear that there's 3 pieces of information and 3 things that we want to find. So this is going to end up being a 3 by 3 system. I will make X equal to the amount of money placed, not the amount of money in there later, but the amount of money placed in the 4%. Y will be the amount of money in the 5.5%. And Z will be the amount of money in the 6%. Okay. So if I set up the system, $24,500 was invested. So at the beginning, I had X plus Y plus Z, and that's 24,500. If I multiply each of these values by the amount that we get in interest, that's going to equal 1,300. It's important to know what this actually is going to look like, though. Remember, percents, we have to convert them into decimals by moving the decimal place 2 to the left. So that's 0.04x plus 0.055y plus 0.06z. So that equation, you have to know a little bit about percents in order to get that. And then the final equation is that we know that the amount of money in the 4% account is 4 times the amount of money in the 5.5% account. That means X equals 4Y. Because if I multiply the amount of money in the 5.5% account by 4, so if I take this amount of money, which we don't know yet, but if I take that amount of money and I multiply it by 4, I'm going to get the amount in the 4% account. Because 4 times this account is in the 4% account, there's 4 times the amount of money in the 5.5% account. So that means that this account has more money, which means that I should multiply the amount in the smaller account by 4. A lot of times that causes some confusion. Now, if I'm going to solve this by substitution, I would probably just substitute 4y in for x in a lot of different places. But if I wanted to solve using an augmented matrix or by substitution or something, I would convert the bottom equation to x minus 4y equals 0. After I'm done solving all this, my answers are the money in the 4% account is $8,000. The amount of money in the Y account or the 5.5% account is $2,000. The amount of money in the 6% account is $14,500. Finally, problem 5. Again, this is going to be a 3 by 3 system. We have 3 points and 3 variables. Now, one thing that causes a lot of confusion in this problem is that the variables are actually A, B, and C. X is not a variable because we know what X is 3 different times, and we know what Y is 3 different times. So we're going to take these X's and Y's and substitute them in for X and Y, and that's going to leave us with A, B, and C as the things we don't know. So if I take -2 and I substitute it in for X, -2 squared is 4. -2 just regular is -2. So I have 4a minus 2b plus c, and that gives me 40. So again, I'm just taking this -2 and I'm substituting it in for x everywhere. That leaves me with a, b, and c. Now I'm going to do it with 1 squared, because remember I'm plugging it in for x. 1 squared is 1. 1 is just 1, so 1b, and then c. That equals 7. And then finally, if I substitute 3 in, 3 squared is 9, plus b times 3, that gives me 3b, plus c equals 15. If I solve this system of equations, I'm going to end up getting a equals 3, b equals -8, and c equals 12. Notice that the problem asked us for the equation of the parabola, so our answer actually has to be in terms of an equation of a parabola. So the equation of the parabola is y equals 3x squared minus 8x plus 12. Really quick, I want to show you two things. One, on the calculator, remember you can use augmented matrices in order to do this. If you have not watched that video, please do so. But I'm just showing you the last two augmented matrices, what they showed up with at the end. In the last one that we just did, notice that the first column is A, the second column is B, and the third column is C. So when it says 1, 0, 0, that means A equals 3, then B equals -8. So they're not X, Y, and Z in this case because we're actually solving for A, B, and C. And then finally, one thing I wanted to show you quickly at the end is that 3x squared minus 8x plus 12 should have the 3 points on the graph that we were told should be on the graph. So if they don't, we did it wrong. -240 seems to work in the equation. That's good. 1, 7 works in the equation. That's good. And then 315 should also work in the equation, which it does. So it appears that we did it right, and we can check that using a graphing calculator like Desmos.